Hello and welcome to another episode of India and Global Left. If you are new to the show, please hit that subscribe button. Also consider becoming a YouTube member, a Patreon, or donate small amount given in the link in the description box. Without further ado, let me welcome our guest tonight, Colonel Wilkerson. Colonel Wilkerson is a retired U.S. Army colonel and former Chief of Staff to the United States Secretary of State Colin Powell. Colonel Wilkerson, welcome back to India and Global Left.
Thank you. Good to be with you again.
I wanted to start with the conflict. What is your assessment of the conflict between the U.S., Israel, and Iran?
I think they didn't read their Karl von Clausewitz. The very first thing that Clausewitz lays down, not necessarily as a principle, but as a reality, is that anytime you think about extending politics, which is his conception, of course, with violent means, by other means, you need to know the nature of what you're going to create, the nature of the conflict. It is crystal clear to me that neither Netanyahu, although he comes closer probably to understanding what he's doing, but certainly not Trump, Hegseth, Rubio, and others in the administration here in Washington, understand the nature. It's so clear that it's painful to watch them. Rubio last night, for example, confusing him, even himself, and certainly the press crowd around him. Trump all over the map. His objectives have vacillated majorly just in the past 96 hours, 48 hours in particular. They do not understand what they're embarked upon. And as Clausewitz goes on to write, if you don't understand the nature of the conflict, you're doomed from the start. And let's just look at what the nature of this conflict is. I think it may develop along several different lines, but I think the nature of this conflict is one side, a 3,000-year-old people, if you will, is determined to fight to the death, virtually all 90 million of them. The other side is a pipsqueak in terms of ancient nature, barely been here 250 years, has nonetheless amassed a great deal of power, a lot of it through luck and fortune, but nonetheless a great deal of power, and doesn't understand the other side's motivation and thinks that it can just prick them here, there, and everywhere, kill children, decapitate them, take out one of the probably most revered men in the Shia world, at least. And I suspect from what we're seeing around Arab capitals where the Sunni population is higher, we're seeing similar attitudes on their part, partly because they detest their leaders, but also because Islam is Islam, whether you're Shia, Sunni, or whatever. And they don't like it. They just don't like it. If you saw the contrast, and we propagandize this in this country, our news propagandize this. But I saw other news. If you saw the contrast between the people that turned out to honor Ali Khamenei and those that turned out to protest the regime, it was astronomically different. So that's a huge component of this, I think, that is going to wear down Donald Trump and his administration significantly over the next few days. And I haven't even talked about other implications of it, like energy, for example. I was reading this morning in the Daily Telegraph, I think it was the Telegraph. India has your country has about 25 days of what you might call raw crude, refinable raw crude, and refined products, about 25 days. 60% or more of India's oil comes through the Strait of Hormuz. That strait's going to be closed. And Trump only now realizes that and has ordered the Fifth Fleet and the Navy in general to keep it open. I got news for him. I've been there. I've done that. We tried that many years ago in El Dorado Canyon, reflagging Kuwaiti tankers and escorting them through the Gulf. One thing we got was a warship pulled so badly by a mine that she had to limp back to America. Took her days and days to get back. Wonder we didn't lose her. And an oil tanker, Bridgerton, whose skipper was ready to shoot us because he hit a mine too. Now, that was a long time ago, though. We ultimately managed to get the strait open and ships to go through it as we escorted them with our warships long time ago. Iran has learned significantly since that time. You've got in the strait itself maybe 17 nautical miles of water, maybe 17 miles. But when you take the depth into consideration and the channel necessary to satisfy the depth for a big tanker and whatever, it's much, much narrower. I've been told it's as narrow as 3 miles, and we played it at 3 miles when we played an exercise in Beijing in 2009 where we simulated this very thing. So you have got a real possibility of Al Ansar, the Houthis, closing the Red Sea again for all traffic except that which they support, like China or like Iran or like Russia, but closing it to all others, particularly those supporting Israel, and the Persian Gulf too. So we're talking about a huge amount of world economic power not being able to flow the way it should be, except at vastly increased expense. And by the Red Sea and the Bab el Mandeb, I don't mean just oil. It's all manner of goods that flow through the Suez Canal, of course. So we're looking at an enormous impact on the world's economy that people like Modi, for example, who hates Muslims, so is on Bibi Netanyahu's side, are not taking into consideration either. And if I were Putin, Putin's going to make a windfall off of this, an absolute windfall. The prices of Brent crude and West Texas Intermediate, the benchmarks already headed up. When we did the exercise in Beijing in 2009, they wound up at $200 a barrel. That's catastrophic for most people in the world. And I've got news for Trump again. Everybody in the world, the only commodity probably that is this essential, needs it, has got to have it. And let me tell you something else about what Trump did. He promised throughout his campaign. And then once he became president, he said he would fulfill his promise to refill the U.S. petroleum reserve. That reserve has a national security critical factor of 500 billion barrels. 500 million barrels, I guess it is. No, maybe it's billion. I don't know. I'm not an oil man, but it's 500 something. It's right now at 415. I suspect it's billion. So that means it's dangerously low by our own criterion. And oh, by the way, are you going to refill it with this very expensive oil that's going to be out there making your cronies a lot of money for sure, making Putin a lot of money for sure? But where are you going to get it and how fast are you going to get it? Because you're in a war now. You're in a war that has every prospect of being eternal, of lasting and lasting and lasting until you kill the last Persian in the last mountain in Iran. And let me tell you, that's going to be really tough because you don't have any soldiers and Marines to do it with. You do not. And you declare a draft and mobilize America, and 3/4 of America's use will go to Canada and Mexico overnight. Guaranteed. Absolutely guaranteed. So those are just a few of the things that I'm truly worried about. The most significant of which is they don't understand what they're in. They simply do not understand what they've started.
According to one report in the New York Times, about 2 or 3 ships have passed through Strait of Hormuz, while on an average, the daily average is about 80 ships.
Right.
And so, and the then crude oil price is already up 15 to 20%, and it has clocked. Last time I checked was $85 per barrel. I guess it's soon about to cross 100, and who knows where.
And importantly, insurance companies and shippers have already said informally, one insurance company formally, they've published their new rates. They're astronomical.
Absolutely. And yeah, I do think about global South countries like India, who happens to be very susceptible to inflation, and crude oil is one of the very important markers of inflation. India probably have access to Russian oil, even though the U.S. has done everything it could to dissuade India from buying. But I also wonder what Europe would do, provided it has no intention to make peace with Russia. and now they're participating in this war.
They are going to have to make some really hard decisions if I'm right about the nature of this war and it goes on. Because you're right, they are going to be in trouble. They're going to be in trouble because they're not willing to take oil. Putin has offered them several times during this conflict to resume shipments of oil, even though we blew up one of his pipelines. But they don't want to do it. It would help immeasurably 6 months, a year ago, even 2 years ago, even because one of the reasons Germany's economy is floundering is because it lost so much when the energy prices went up so high. People left. They're not going to stay around and pay those energy prices. So Europe's got a hard decision to make here. And Iran has made it even harder by attacking their assets in Cyprus and showing them that they have no qualms about extending this campaign to people who are helping the genocide in Gaza and the other efforts of the United States to corner the region. And I think we're hearing the truth out of Naftali Bennett and others since he made his statements about Israel's greater Israel goals. I think he was telling the truth when he said the next target is Turkey. So Israel had pulled Erdogan for whatever reason, not certainly a substantive one on Erdogan's part. He's just playing politics again and looking for help for his economy, which he thought Israel could give him, into its orbit, into Netanyahu's orbit. But I'm not so sure he's going to stay there now, because he's got a real problem too in terms of what's developing, and what's developing is they covet you. They want your country too. And I don't doubt that for a minute. These greater Zionists are just unbelievably, in my view, unbelievably stupid people. They think that this pipsqueak state in the eastern end of the Mediterranean, which is supported almost wholly in its atrocities and in its economy, with one or two exceptions by the United States. And they think those one or two exceptions, I guess, which are mostly involved with the arms industry or ancillary to the arms industry or the AI or whatever to power that industry, because that's where they headed. They think that's enough to make them a great economy. I got news for them. The reason they've been fairly economically successful is we have gone out of our way. A war in Iraq, supporting what was the name of the oil company that Mark Rich ran? I forget it now, but supporting Mark Rich as he stole oil from Saddam Hussein's UN Oil for Food program and shipped it to Israel at discounted prices. Supporting the Kurds in northern Iraq as they clandestinely shipped oil to Israel at discounted prices, in exception of Baghdad's policy. I mean, we have made Israel what it is. No question about it. Yes, is there some genius there? Is some capitalist genius, some entrepreneurial genius? Yes. But you know what? In the 1,000 people that have already Jews, that have 1,000 people, what am I saying? Million people, Jewish Israelis who have already left and might not come back, because the number one proposition for them was a safe haven. And Israel is anything but a safe haven right now. Is going to cripple Israel too. And I suspect they're going to lose another million over the next 6 months, if not more. So I don't get the dreams of these Zionists, and the fact that I don't see how they're going to fulfill them. I, of course, don't want them to fulfill them, and I don't think anyone in the region wants them to fulfill them. Look at Doha, look at Abu Dhabi, look at any Arab state, look at Egypt. I know it's questionable whether that's an Arab state or not amongst those who do that sort of parsing, but they are sitting on powder kegs too. Their people don't like them. And I think this is rather astute. At first, I thought it was a mistake by Iran, but then I got to thinking about it after I talked to a couple of my friends in Tehran. One of the reasons they're hitting the Arab states right now in a cursory fashion, but they have killed some people and done some property damage, is because they're hitting basically what is supporting the autocratic regime, whether it's oil or whatever. They are hoping that in Saudi Arabia, for example, only 20% of the population is Shia, but I think that distinction is going to by the wayside if it turns out that people want to, and they're angry about Palestine already, rise up and overthrow their own rulers in the countries in which they presently live. So Iran's given them more incentive to do that, I think, because Iran is essentially saying, hey, we're hitting the people that are oppressing you. I looked at the photographs, which our media would not show, came out of India, I think. It was India and I think Iran itself, and maybe one other country, showing the Bahrainis, for example, celebrating as our fifth headquarters fleet was burning, our headquarters building was burning. And oh, by the way, I have good reports from there that, or what I mean is, I think reliable reports from there, that strike actually hit the vertical launch missile reloading facility. It's a very sophisticated apparatus, and to reload these vertical launch missiles in the DDEs and the DDs in particular, the naval warships, it's a very delicate operation. You have to put them right down in their little encasing in the ship, and you have to do it very carefully. It takes people on deck, and it takes a sophisticated crane. Well, they destroyed that in Bahrain, apparently. So that means they got to go all the way to Diego Garcia to do that, where the next one is available. That's a long transit. So Iran did some significant damage there, if that's the case. Again, there are so many ramifications of this war that we think is simple and short that are going to make it long and not simple.
What do you make of the news about Turkey intercepting missiles? There are some who say that it is indeed Iran who sees the Mediterranean as a threat. For instance, the USS Gerald Horn is loitering somewhere in the Mediterranean, having come back from participating in the kidnapping of Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. So that might be a target. We have covered one program about Cyprus and the Akrotiri and the Bekalia base, the British base, NATO base, they are all the same, and their importance for West Asia with Matt Cunard. Those are all targets, but there are also some who say that these may be false flag by Israel to drag Turkey or NATO into the conflict. I wonder what your sense is.
I'd vote for the latter, and I will tell you something else too. You probably know it, but I'll tell your listeners if you don't or they don't. Israel is in Cyprus and southern Greece right now, starting the campaign against the Turks. They are already working to make sure they have intelligence conduits. They have people working for them on their payroll. They have Cypriots in particular who will be part of the policy of overthrowing Ankara. And they're already at it. They're already working, much the way they were working in Iran during the Iran-Iraq War, and spun that off into what happened later when so many agents arose in the moment of U.S. attack, that first attack with the B-2s flying over and everything, and went around and killed a lot of Iranians and destroyed a lot of Iranian air defense capability and a lot of Iranian power. Really destroyed it. Well, what the Iranians did in that instance was ferret all these people out, and they either put them in prison for life or they killed them. That's what Israel is doing in southern Greece and Cyprus right now, is recruiting all these people because they're going to need that sort of fifth column as they go after Turkey. That's the only thing I know positively is going on right now with regard to Israel and Turkey, and maybe the potential for a false flag operation. And I don't put any of that. I don't put it past. This is very dangerous. I don't know why we're doing it, but if I'm being told correctly by the maps that are being displayed, and I saw Danny Davis and Doug McGregor, I think, put one up the other day, we have combatants in the northern end of the Persian Gulf. When I was at U.S. Pacific Command, which at that time in the 80s and early 90s, was the force provider for Central Command. Central Command was just a little pipsqueak command. We were the big force provider. We had a sort of standing rule. You would never put a U.S. warship in the Persian Gulf. If you put a U.S. warship in the Persian Gulf, you would do it very, very carefully and only for a selected short period of time. You'd never put a carrier in. Never, because its turning radius is too wide. It's too difficult to turn. The reason that F-18 fell off that carrier and we lost it in the Red Sea was because the skipper panicked. He was getting shot at after all, and turned too fast. And the crew didn't have a chance to, get over to the side and say, "Oh, we need to chalk these planes differently." One of them went in, losing $1 million fighter jet. So I don't know why we're doing that, but Iran could sink those ships at any moment. Here's the reality of it. You could take a single individual, swim him out to the ship with a metallic mine, and sink that ship. It's that simple because it's not very deep, and the ships are not able to fight, if you will, the way they would on the open sea or even in the Sea of Oman or the North Arabian Sea. Been lots of exercises. I know all about this as a student of the Navy at the Naval War College and elsewhere. So I don't know why we're doing that. We are asking for a false flag by Israel, for example, to get us tighter into the war, or for Iran to simply take one or both of them out. I have no idea why we've got them positioned there.
I I want to come back to your important point about understanding the nature of the conflict, and just to be a little bit specific, Colonel Wilkerson, if you could give us a sense of the military strengths and weakness of the two sides, given the entire Western mainstream media has been covering a pretty one-sided coverage of the military strengths and weaknesses of both the sides. They're practically repeating what is coming out of the mouths of Hexet and Trump and Dan Kane and others, and more importantly, Israeli officials. They're repeating and they are packaging them as if these are verified news. On the other hand, there are some, but I think they are more trusted, but they are giving us a more probably balanced view about the strengths and weaknesses of missiles, the difficulties of um, the NATO side to, or let's say the US Israel side to intercept these missiles, how expensive they are. So, for our viewers, if you could share your thoughts on how they are placed, the both sides are placed on military grounds.
First, we were hearing almost unbelievable. I know that's hard to accept, those people who've been listening to Trump now for over a year or even longer. We're hearing some just incredible lies from Donald Trump. I don't know if he knows he's lying because the military is lying to him, or if he's just doing what he normally does, just speaking off the top of his head and saying, "This is great, that's great, we got 1 million of these, we got 2 million of these." When you parse it closely with experts out there and with people who I think are telling me the truth, we are not in good shape, nor is Israel ultimately, for a number of reasons that are operationally smart by Iran. And you would think that after being deceived majorly several times, particularly the latter time, with the B-2s flying and so forth, they would have grown smarter. They're not stupid people. So what they're doing right now is very carefully using their least expensive weapons, of which they have thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. They're using the least expensive to do what they did in the beautiful war, if you will, the 12, 13-day beautiful war, to test Israeli, but also in the region, U.S. and U.S. partners, air defenses, and to see if what they confirmed that first time around, several months ago, is still valid, and if anything new is developed. Now, on their side is a lot of new radars from Russia and China, new missiles from Russia and China, new technicians from Russia and China, all of whom are basically operating underground. Even the new squadrons, as I understand it, of the latest Russian plane are underground. So you don't know exactly what it is that they have, but I'm hearing from reliable sources that in terms of missiles, it's vast. It really is a lot. And they're underground. So the only time they're vulnerable is when they come up to shoot. And we don't have enough coverage to get all of that all of the time. It's impossible. And let me give you a little indicator of why that is. If you're flying off Lincoln, she's 1,000 miles away, and rightfully so, because Iran has missiles that will sink her. I'm waiting to see. I'm waiting to see if they will do that, because I know they have high velocity missiles that will sink Lincoln. That's 5,000 American sailors in the water, probably 2,000 to 3,000 dead immediately. So if you're flying from 1,000 nautical miles away, you need tanking. Those fighters do not have that range, particularly the F-35 does not have that range. And we sent God knows how many squadrons of F-35s over there. Hopefully, we're hoping that they have a better mission operational rate of 30%, or maybe they approach 50%, because that's about, in all versions, what they were making was fully mission capable 50% of the time at best. So that's half your fleet gone right there. But you got to tank them. And you got to have very expensive big tankers overhead, or you got to use the tankers indigenous to the ship, and they won't tank very much at all because they're not much bigger than the fighter that is taking the fuel on. So real complications here in getting these ballistic missiles, and Trump is saying every day that we're killing them all. We're killing them all. Well, I know that can't possibly be true because we can't target them. And they're very ephemeral in the way they operate. They come up and they shoot and they go back down again. I'm sure we're getting some, no question about that, but some is not a lot out of what I hear are just tens of thousands of missiles. So Iran is being very circumspect about doing what it's doing, and it is testing the system with the first wave. Some of them we've seen got through. One of the little drones killed 22 people, wounded 70, and 6 are still missing in Israel. So some of those are getting through, and once the Israelis and the U.S. and our allies have expended the Patriots and other things that we're shooting, and we will expend them, then they're going to send the better missiles in. They're not going to risk them in terms of air defense assets. So, and the last category of missiles they're going to send in, if again my information is correct, are the ones that move at Mach 3, Mach 4, maybe even Mach 5. We can't hit them with anything. Nothing we have in our inventory will stop them. I suspect that's the kind they're going to save for the Lincoln, and maybe even the Ford. They could hit the Ford in the Mediterranean, sink both aircraft carriers. Donald Trump would not even have a prospect of being reelected. And I suspect Donald Trump would be headed for impeachment if the Congress had any sense. But that's the kind of potential that exists here, and that's the kind of nature of the conflict that exists. And the Iranians seem to be willing to be very patient and take advantage of. And they seem to have the munitions to do it. I think Bibi knows this. So I would be very surprised, and I was there during the 73 war. I would be very surprised if he hasn't already uploaded several nuclear weapons. Very surprised. And that worries me. That's very dangerous.
I guess I needed to ask you also about the strategy of attacking civilians, because we have all read about the attack in the elementary girls' school in Minab in the Hormuzgan province in southern Iran. There are reports about the attack in Gandhi Hospital in Tehran. And now CNN has given us a detailed coverage about Trump speaking to Turkish leaders in Western Iran and other parts bordering Iraq. They are trying to use them as do something that they tried in Iraq and Syria, rebel groups, arming them, destabilizing them. We, of course, know that Iran is internally very vigilant. The Basij of the IRGC wing is extremely vigilant. But I wonder your thoughts on these developments, particularly given in Syria, the Turkish sides were kind of abdicated, if you like, in exchange for the Al Qaeda and ISIS. And Turkey would be very, very nervous about the US siding or even trying to prop up the Kurdish again in Iran. Your thoughts on all these developments?
I think it's very dangerous, and I think it smells markedly of Bibi Netanyahu, whose goal is not Trump's goal. Trump has said what his goal is, and I think this is one thing I believe. His goal is essentially to get a better regime in Tehran or something like that. Bibi Netanyahu's goal is not that. He doesn't want a regime in Tehran. He wants utter confusion all across the breadth of Iran, which is a pretty considerable breadth. Utter confusion. And he wants that confusion to look a lot like Syria in terms of what Syria looked like for a couple of years there when Assad was holding on by his bare hands and was being beaten back into Damascus. By the way, Israel wants Damascus and Syria too. So watch this ground movement into Lebanon expand if it's successful. And I don't know if Hezbollah has the power left, the munitions left, the leadership left to withstand them in any significant way. But if they don't, watch them invest most of Syria too, because that's part of their agenda. They want Syria also. And they want Lebanon. They've wanted Lebanon for a long time. We are the power that's kept them from consolidating their control over Lebanon. And you may recall in 82 and 83, I think it was, when they really got themselves in a trick bag, we had to bail them out. And as they were bailed out, they committed atrocities in the refugee camps as they came out. Oh, Ariel Sharon was the guy in charge of that war, later prime minister. They don't change. These people don't change. Their goal is what they're doing. And to your point, that's two very different objectives. To have an Iran that has a good government and is stable and is in the US's orbit versus to have a completely chaotic 90 million people country as big as Iran, which is what Bibi wants. So stand by while they reconcile their objectives, but I don't think Donald even understands that that is what Bibi wants. So we're looking at, as you suggested, we're looking at Erdogan having different interests here and maybe surprising everyone and suddenly entering the fight in a place where people didn't think he would, people being Bibi Netanyahu. And he's got to be aware. He's got to be. I know Bibi went and wined and dined him and, gave his full pitch to him about all the economic help he would get from Israel and so forth and so on. And Erdogan apparently fell for the whole thing. But that's not going to stop him from realizing what Bibi's real intentions are if they suddenly manifest themselves. So your point is well taken. You might bring Turkey into this fray, not just because of the Kurds, but because they see what Israel is doing and realize it's inimical to their interests. So, as I said before, this has all kinds of ramifications that we just haven't thought out. We could put the entire region in a war situation. And that has a very bad tendency to spread too. Think about Ukraine and the Levant merging in terms of hostility. And we're right there in Azerbaijan. We're right there in Armenia. We're right there in Georgia trying to stir that up against Putin. We haven't stopped. We're still trying to overthrow the government that got elected by the skin of its teeth, but got elected because its policy was a balanced policy between Moscow and Europe and Washington, in Georgia, in Tbilisi. We're still trying to overthrow that government. And Putin knows it.
I was struck by something very interesting you said about the gap in the objectives of Trump and Netanyahu. In other words, Trump wants friendly government in the region, while Netanyahu wants statelessness in the region, so that there should be just one state and Zionist state and the colonial state so that it can expand more and more. That was an interesting framework.
Yeah, I think Trump is going to come to realize that, and Hegseth and Rubio too. I don't know how fast they're going to arrive at that realization, but it may take action on the ground that contradicts what Trump wants to do visibly and physically, for him to realize that he's got a partner that, while Miriam Adelson's money may be burning a hole in his ass, he still has a partner that may end his presidency. And that's going to be a decisive moment within the Allied framework, if you will. I don't dare call it that. I hate to say Allied framework with Israel and the United States. That's what it is, of course. But there's a reason why we never called them a formal ally. We have never, not really. Trump has done it to an extent, but we've never really formally identified Israel as an ally of the United States. Major non-NATO ally, all kinds of characterizations, but not a formal ally in the sense of Japan, Korea, other countries. There's a reason.
What is your sense of the future of, future of the Gulf or GCC countries and Iran? A lot of that would be determined by the outcome of this conflict or the trajectory of this conflict. But I'm very curious if you think they have begun to see the vulnerabilities of being vassal states of the empire, given how unpredictable the empire is and even how vulnerable the empire is, because many are abandoning embassies and some reportedly even bases to hide in hotels in the Gulf countries, which Iran has hit. And on the other hand, Iran seems to me, at least, and tell me if you agree or not, seems to be very, very cautious so far, at least, in discriminating their attacks on the Gulf states. They are trying very hard, at least in as part of their official statements, that we are only attacking U.S. military assets, and even the few hotels and buildings we have attacked is because U.S. personnel have retreated to these places, effectively signaling to the world and the region that we are not out here for chaos, even though if we are forced, there would be no red lines, as Abbas Araghchi said. You're reading up the future of the Gulf states' relationship with Iran.
First of all, I think I went through, and Dr. Rice, of all things that we dealt with her on, National Security Advisor for George W. Bush, was adamant on this for a time, and even made the president angry, which is why she fell off of it. But I'm of a mind that the Arab Spring should have succeeded. And so was she to a certain extent. When it didn't, there were a lot of us that were concerned, and we began to do some analysis of why, and a lot of reasons came out, of course, part of which was the fecklessness of the leadership of those who were opposing people like Mubarak, and even in Riyadh and Abu Dhabi and elsewhere. But the biggest reason was, as expressed by one of the experts on the policy planning staff at State at the time, was the malaise of the people. They just don't have the guts to get up and attack their leadership, even though their leadership, more often than not, operates opposite of their collective interests, the majority of the people. We saw that in Iraq to a certain extent, too. We saw it with the Shia, for example, the majority being oppressed by the Sunnis and the Shia not doing anything about it, or even when we tried to help them, not doing anything about it. So it's hard to say that these folks are ever going to get the gumption and the leadership, the determination to overthrow these autocrats. But let me say, and be on the record here, they should. That being said, and I think Mohammed bin Salman, maybe not Mohammed bin Zayed and others, but I think MBS actually understands that he's sitting on top of a powder keg. And he understands that he has to kill a lot of people periodically in order to convince them that they don't want to light the fuse to that powder keg. So what's happening right now, once again, not in the way the Arab Spring promised, but in a very different way, a Clausewitzian way, the nature of the war could expand and be different very quickly. This has the potential, once again, to unseat some of these people. And I think Iran is being very circumspect for the reasons you stated clearly. It doesn't want more enemies than it can handle. Conservation of enemies is the number one principle of war. But at the same time, it may be exploring what the possibilities are, especially if you get that kind of reaction like you did in Bahrain or in Karachi, where they're beating on our consulate and trying to break the windows down and kill us. I watched that. I helped put those windows in there because we knew that consulate was very vulnerable and it was very close to the street. I'm watching them hit these windows with pitchforks and axes and sledgehammers, and they're bouncing off the windows, of course, because they're very expensive windows and they're safety windows. But that was rage. That was pure rage. And we haven't even talked about Pakistan's role in this. A nuclear power that has promised Iran and promised Riyadh, both of them, that should they need a nuclear weapon, they have it. At their beck and call, they have it. And I believe that. I believe that 100% because I was in the AQCOM network breakup and I saw how AQCOM was revered by the bulk of the Islamic world from one end to the other as the father of the Islamic atomic bomb. And I saw how many people really hated our guts for having taken him out virtually. So this is all the warp and woof of the region that it was incandescent during the Arab Spring and now may be made incandescent again by this war. And the Iranians, I think, have the long view. We don't. We never have the long view. We don't do strategy. But they have the long view. They can stand out for a long time. They can recruit for a long time. They can hit selected targets for a long time. And we're not going to stop them from doing that unless we invade. And if we invade, we're finished. We're finished. That will make Iraq and Afghanistan look like child's play doing Iran. 90 million people in a vast country with mountains and everything. That will be the end of the empire's ability to influence the Middle East.
Do you think they might make a mistake of invading even? Or they at least have brains to that extent that they know that they can't do it?
Trump has talked about it. Trump has talked about it publicly. He's written about it. I hope what's left of the Pentagon leadership, and I mean that, Hegseth has been carefully picking them apart. He's been carefully setting aside 2 stars, 3 stars, and even a couple of 4 stars. And he's been carefully packing the ranks also with Christian nationalists, with people who believe in Armageddon, preachers who are talking to them about Armageddon and the necessity for this war. Turn on your YouTube and look at John Hagee yesterday, I think it was, or maybe 2 days ago. John Hagee, head of Christians United for Israel. And he is inciting the military to look at it as Armageddon, to look at themselves as crusaders, to look at this as the end times being brought about by their actions. I'm not kidding. This is going on right now in this country, in my country. This is going on. So it is a moment that has the potential to flare up into a much more serious conflict on so many different issues and in so many different dimensions, not least of which is getting a whole lot of, how many Arabs are there? Last time I looked, it was about 400 million. We're talking about a mess. If Modi thinks he has a mess with the Muslims in India, wait till he's got a mess on his border with this business.
We're coming to an end. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the domestic sentiment and situation in the United States regarding this war. Not very often in the past, we've seen opposition to U.S. imperial wars right away from the start. I mean, it often starts to increase once the U.S. starts losing because they don't want to lose or be on the losing side. But we have seen from Vietnam to Iraq to Afghanistan, Americans tend to rally behind the flag, at least to start with. This time, it struck me that it was completely the opposite if you go by many of these polls. On the military side, I had Scott Ritter on a couple of days ago, and he said exactly what you said about the politicization of the military, which is leading to very severe conflict within the military between those who are professionals, let's say, and those who are more politicized and ideologically motivated. Um, what is the implication of this war on US domestic politics, or vice versa?
Let me hit your last point first because it's the potentially most dangerous. What this is doing is ramifying what Pete Hegseth was ordered to do and has been doing very carefully within the Pentagon and within the ranks of the military. You saw him start this process at Quantico when he gathered all the flag officers together and most of their enlisted assistants and spoke to them. And the president showed up and spoke to them too. What he's doing is he's preparing the military for what it was not on January the 6th in the previous end of the previous administration. It was absolutely opposed to a coup. And at worst, it would have stood aside and said, no, Mr. President, which is kind of what Milley, the then chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, insinuated later. Today, Hegseth is almost there with getting enough of the military to support a coup that he could go ahead and confidently tell the president, don't worry, it won't happen again. It will not happen again. But what that's doing, and you put your finger on it, there's still some professionals. There are still some people who feel differently, people who feel the Constitution is what they swear their oath to, not the man in the Oval Office, and certainly not some preacher, not Jesus Christ. That really roused these people that they should be swearing oath to Jesus Christ, which is what some of these guys, Hegseth's preacher, says that's what they should be swearing allegiance to. Jesus Christ, not the Constitution. So we've got the potential in this war, and what you just described about our looking like we might be losing it, or at least not gaining any ground very quickly, feeds into that majorly, because if that's the case, then Trump has got to take a move fast, maybe even during the midterms, if not before them. He's got to settle this very quickly, or he's going to be in a position where they are mounted up and riding their horses toward impeachment. And the American people are going to be behind him. And you are absolutely right. Getting to your bigger point, the polls right now are showing less than a third, some as low as 27, 28% of the American people are for this war for different reasons, but nonetheless. And that's a percentage that's working within the MAGA crowd, too. So this is a dangerous moment, both domestically and internationally. They could feed each other in a way that aids Trump in being the authoritarian, the tyrant that he wants to be, and ultimately being successful.
We'll leave it there, Colonel Wilkerson. This was a very, very interesting conversation. I would end with what you said right at the beginning before the recording, that perhaps we could meet in a different circumstance. But that's for the future, I suppose. Until then, thank you so much, and have a wonderful rest of the day ahead.
You too. And thank you for allowing me to come on.
Hi, my name is Ayushman. I, along with Jyotisman, have started this platform. In the last 2 years, we have tried to build content for the left and progressive forces. We have interviewed economists, historians, political commentators, and activists so far. If you have liked our content so far and want us to build an archive for the left, I have two requests for you. Please do consider donating for the cause. Link is in the description below. Also, if you are not able to do so, don't feel sad. You can always like our videos and share our videos to your comrades. Finally, don't forget to hit the subscribe button.